faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'm introducing the book From Myth to History by Japanese archaeologist Miyamoto Iwa. Since ancient times, populous China has possessed a unique civilization. This civilization is not only highly creative and vibrant, but has also made outstanding contributions to East Asian and world history. In Japan, as a neighbor closely connected to China, has long been influenced by Chinese civilization. Therefore, Japan has always paid great attention to China's history and culture. In 2009, coinciding with the centenary of Japan's renowned publisher Kodansha, to commemorate a century of publishing, Kodansha collaborated with 10 authoritative historians to create the series Kodansha's History of China, which chronicles China's development from ancient times to the modern era over thousands of years. The entire series combines readability with seriousness, making it a highly anticipated masterpiece of historical work. And the book we're interpreting today, From Myth to History, yes, is the first volume in this series. Now, let's take a detailed look at the content of this book. The book mainly covers 4 parts. First, environmental changes, how it shaped the development patterns of prehistoric East Asians. Second, what kind of lifestyle early inhabitants had. Third, how early civilizations grew and collided. Fourth, how the earliest states emerged in the Chinese land. Next, let's discuss the first part, environmental changes. How did it shape the development patterns of prehistoric East Asians? About 10,000 years ago, humans in East Asia began agricultural activities, a key marker of humanity entering the civilization era. So, why did humans enter this new civilization stage at this time? The author suggests that besides the gradual accumulation of human wisdom, significant changes in climate, temperature, and species in East Asia were crucial factors driving agricultural development and the birth of human civilization. First, the climate factor. The uplift of the Tibetan Plateau laid the climatic foundation for agriculture in East Asia. About 80 million years ago, the Tibetan Plateau in western China began to uplift and form, establishing the geographical feature of High West and Low East in East Asia. The glacial meltwater from the Tibetan Plateau nourishes the Yangtze and Yellow River basins, providing water for agricultural production along their banks. Moreover, the blocking effect of the Tibetan Plateau enhances precipitation in southern regions. East Asia has a monsoon climate, with humid summer monsoons entering from the southeast and southwest. Monsoons from the southwest are blocked by the Tibetan Plateau and can't go north deeply. Instead, they bypass the southeastern edge into regions like southwest China, South China, and central China. As a result, the climate in southern regions becomes very humid, and precipitation increases accordingly. This warm and humid environment is ideal for growing crops like rice. Therefore, the author states that the uplift of the Tibetan Plateau laid the foundation for the development and expansion of agriculture. And secondly, temperature changes triggered the transformation of prehistoric human production methods. 2 million years ago, Earth entered a cold period, with Arctic glaciers expanding to lower latitudes, covering northern parts of Eurasia and America. This is what we commonly call the Ice Age. By 10,000 years ago, global climate began to warm, glaciers melted, and flora and fauna from southern subtropical and tropical regions migrated northward on a large scale. Archaeologists have discovered that elephants roamed the Yellow River Basin 10,000 years ago, while in modern Asia, wild elephants are only found in Xishuangbanna, Yunnan, and further south in the Indochina Peninsula. However, temperatures during warm periods don't always stabilize. Due to solar activity and geological events like volcanic eruptions, Earth's temperature can suddenly drop, leading to dry and cold periods, causing local species extinction in northern East Asia. The inhabitants of this region could no longer get enough food through gathering and hunting, so artificial cultivation of crops and domestication of livestock came into view. Simultaneously, the drop in temperature caused sea levels to fall, exposing land at the ocean's edge and forming large wetlands and marshes in coastal areas. These lands, covered by seawater, had accumulated rich nutrients and became fertile, quickly becoming key bases for agricultural production. Therefore, the author states that the dry and cold temperatures stimulated the birth of agriculture. Finally, species diversity laid the foundation for the spread of agricultural production. East Asia has over 30,000 species of higher plants, second only to Southeast Asia and the Amazon rainforest. With this natural plant treasury, ancient people could more easily select high-quality species and domesticate high-yield crops. For example, among the 5 grains we often mention, rice, broomcorn millet, foxtail millet, wheat, and soybeans, except for wheat which originated in Central Asia, the other 4 are native East Asian plants. Particularly worth mentioning is broomcorn millet, one of the 5 grains, commonly known as large yellow millet, and its place of origin. Today, in the Chifeng area of Inner Mongolia, which lies at the convergence of mountainous plateaus and plains, the climate is highly variable. As an outstanding plant in this region, broomcorn millet adapts to all 3 climates, featuring cold resistance, drought tolerance, and salt-alkali tolerance. It's easy to cultivate and survive. It was introduced to the Yellow River Basin during the Little Ice Age, becoming Northerners' staple food. All right, that concludes how environmental changes affected prehistoric humans' survival patterns in East Asia. In part 2, let's discuss how early humans lived and worked. About 5,000 years ago, inhabitants of the Yangtze and Yellow River basins began farming, forming early societies and igniting Chinese civilization's dawn. Without mature written records from this era, this history exists mainly as myths like Pangu, creating heaven and earth, or Nvwa, mending the sky. Note, these legends were largely fabricated and compiled only during Han or Tang dynasties, making them highly unreliable. So what exactly was prehistoric life like? What did early human societies look like? Let's follow archaeologists to examine this, starting with Yellow River settlements. The most significant settlements were sites of the historically famous Yangzhou and Longshan cultures. Yangzhou culture emerged between 5000 to 3000 BC during the Neolithic Age. Longshan culture followed closely between 2500 to 2200 BCE in the late Neolithic period. This era saw humans using both bronze and stone tools. Let's now focus on the Yangzhou-Longshan period. First, in Yellow River farmlands, you'd see plants resembling green bristlegrass. But that's not green bristlegrass. It's its relative, foxtail millet, commonly called millet. This foxtail millet was the staple food of ancient northern Chinese we mentioned earlier. In addition to staple foods like millet, ancient people also began domesticating livestock. For example, pigs and cattle that we're familiar with were domesticated during this period. Additionally, ancient people hunted wild deer like roe deer and sika deer in the wilderness to supplement protein through meat. Now that we've covered food, let's talk about housing. At that time, people typically lived on farmland edges, building flat terraces adjacent to fields. Moats and walls were constructed around the terraces to prevent beast attacks and foreign invasions. Inside the walls stood long rows of connected room houses, resembling modern dormitory halls. The author suggests this housing pattern, likely related to seniority-based settlement organization. It probably started with one small hut for the founding ancestors. As children grew independent, they built adjacent homes, continuing through generations. This repetition gradually formed the long connected room houses. Clearly, settlements were kinship-based family organizations with minimal living standard differences. Looking inward, the center of these connected houses featured a small plaza. Livestock were kept as communal property at the residential center. with collective care, responsibilities. No. This layout effectively prevented theft, since residents surrounded the area. Any thief approaching from any direction risked detection by residents. Next, let's discuss how Yellow River inhabitants organized agricultural production. The author notes clear gender division in farming during Liangzhu-Longshan cultures. Tombs reveal stone tools in male burials and grinding stones in female burials, indicating men handled fieldwork while women processed crops. Additionally, northern people had mastered pottery making by this era. Common pottery featured flat bottoms, narrow tops and bottoms, wide middles, mostly painted, used for storing food or water. Some pottery practice served as burial containers for bodies. For instance, the human fish pattern painted pottery basin unearthed in Shanxi in 1955 was actually a coffin sealing lid from that era, according to research. Finally, let's examine the spiritual life of Yellow River inhabitants. Settlements along the Yellow River revered wine-centered sacrificial rituals. Since brewing required large amounts of grain, wine was particularly precious in that era of material scarcity. An era of grain shortage, making it a luxury. Thus, offering wine to ancestors or deities demonstrated the community's deep reverence for rituals. Some archaeologists believe shamans conducting rituals would drink heavily to enter trance states, aiming to communicate spiritually with deities or ancestors. Beyond wine offerings, people also sacrificed livestock like cattle and sheep, and performed music to honor ancestors or deities. For example, over 20 ancient flutes, excavated from Jiahu site in Henan, could play traditional pentatonic or heptatonic melodies. At Taosi site in Shanxi, archaeologists found drums made from Chinese alligator skin, showing sizable ritual orchestras existed. Having covered the Yellow River, let's explore life in the southern Yangtze River Basin. The most representative settlement culture in the Yangtze Basin is Liangzhu culture. Emerging around 5,300 years ago, let's start with material life. The subtropical Yangtze region had warm temperatures and abundant rainfall, making it ideal for rice cultivation. Thus, southern settlements primarily consumed rice as their staple food. Additionally, riverside communities ate fish or water caltrops. Like northerners, Neolithic southerners also produced pottery, though with different shapes. Southerners commonly used ring-foot, cauldron-shaped pottery. As the name suggests, these had spherical bottoms requiring stands for balance during use. For housing, Southerners faced additional challenges: flood control and moisture prevention compared to Northerners. For example, at Quijialing site in the Middle Yangtze, archaeologists discovered large flood control structures. At Liangzhu culture sites around Taihu Lake and Qiantong River, dams built from local materials like thatch and loess served flood control, moisture prevention, irrigation, and transportation, greatly aiding daily life. Additionally, Southerners built distinctive stilt houses, structures elevated on wooden supports with open ground floors. This design prevented threats from snakes or insects while avoiding dampness. Culturally, archaeologists found coming-of-age rituals in Songze culture, slightly earlier than Liangzhu, requiring tooth extraction as adulthood markers. Archaeologists believe these rituals enhanced young members' responsibility and community identity. Liangzhu culture represents the pinnacle of Southern ritual practices. In Liangzhu tribes, shamans acted as divine spokespersons and impersonators. During rituals, shamans wore feathered jade crowns to mimic deities. This suggests Liangzhu people worship divine birds. Thus, divine messengers disguise themselves as bird-like figures. Earlier discussing northern rituals, we noted wine-mediated communication with deities. So how did southern Liangzhu culture communicate with gods? This leads to Liangzhu's sophisticated Kong jade culture. Kong are barrel-shaped jades with circular interiors and square exteriors, similar to brush holders. These primarily served as ritual vessels for worship. Liangzhu produced exceptionally refined Kong, including the 6.5 kilogram Kong King, the largest and most exquisite unearthed specimen, featuring deity patterns. Miyamoto Iwan notes the square exterior, circular interior design reflects ancient Chinese cosmology of round heaven, square earth. The central hollow cylinder likely served as the shaman's communication channel with deities. Remarkably, Liangzhu's Kong culture was adopted by Shang or Zhou dynasties, becoming essential in state rituals until the Qing dynasty. This lifestyle persisted until around 3000 BCE. Then came a dramatic transformation in their lives. This brings us to part 3, how early civilizations grew and collided. First, let's examine civilizational changes. As mentioned earlier, after the Ice Age ended, global temperatures rose, allowing temperate crops to migrate northward into the Inner Mongolian Plateau with shifting climate zones. Thus, inhabitants of the Inner Mongolian Plateau gained access to more cultivable species to engage in agricultural production. But after 3000 BCE, East Asia entered a minor ice age with drastically lowered temperatures and reduced rainfall, ending agricultural viability in highland regions. Lead, air. Facing famine, people increased livestock breeding to survive. Over generations, this transformed highland areas into exclusively pastoral zones. The author notes the Lai vessel's emergence marks the agricultural pastoral societal split. The lyra is a three-legged hollow cooking vessel similar to a tripod, but with completely hollow legs that hold food. This design increased heating surface area, speeding cooking. It also provided better heat retention. The author believes the Lai's invention directly responded to plateau temperature drops. Some archaeologists note its udder-like shape suggests deep connections to pastoral development. Meanwhile, agricultural communities south in the Yellow River Basin show no Lai usage. This indicates a northern civilizational variant emerged, pastoral nomadic culture diverging from agricultural societies. Now let's examine civilizational expansion and fusion. As a river valley civilization, Chinese settlements clustered along major rivers, spreading from the middle lower Yellow and Yangtze basins. During the warm period, 6000 to 3000 BC, southern rice cultivation expanded to Shandong, then Liaodong Peninsula, reaching Korea by 2000 BCE before entering Japan. By then, China was in the spring-autumn warring states period, while Japan remained primitive, relying on shellfish and livestock. However, these foods were perishable and lacked carbohydrates, leaving ancient Japanese in chronic hunger crises. After rice reached Japan, it dramatically improved their diet, propelling the archipelago into agricultural civilization. Civilizational expansion included not just agricultural technology, but also physical exchanges of artifacts. For example, shells, pottery, and jade. Let's start with shells. Archaeological evidence. Archaeologists found cowrie shells used as currency in Neolithic sites along the Middle or Upper Yellow River.
The author notes some varieties, like Monetaria moneta, originated from the distant South China Sea.
Astonishingly, these shells traveled thousands of kilometers through primitive trade networks to the Tibetan Plateau's edge. And current consensus suggests they moved north along the East China Sea coast, then through the Yellow River's lower middle reaches. As for the Upper Yellow River region, now pottery. Unlike shells requiring specific harvesting zones, pottery used local materials. Thus, pottery spread bidirectionally, like high-stem cups from the Middle Yangtze moving to lower Middle Yellow River. Conversely, dew vessels from the Middle Yellow River spread inversely to the Middle Yangtze. Notably, pottery and shell exchanges correlated with tribal leaders' authority. Painted pottery was everyday wear in the Middle Yellow River, found abundantly in both living and burial sites. But at Danku sites downstream, it appeared exclusively in tombs, concentrated in few burial zones. These few tombs contained rich grave goods indicating elite or chieftain burials. This shows exchange networks existed between tribes but were monopolized by leaders. Ordinary members lacked access to such channels. Finally, the unique case of jade exchange. Earlier we mentioned Kong jads from Liangzhu culture in Zhejiang, but they later spread to the Yellow River Basin. Moreover, the author notes beast face patterns on Kong jades gradually faded from south to north. In primitive societies, these patterns represented sacred tribal totems, never casually altered or simplified.
Thus, the author argues Kong spread via abstract religious ideas, not trade or tribute, from Yangtze to Yellow River.
Yellow River inhabitants, inspired by Yangtze Kong culture, produced local versions using native materials. Though decorative details varied or degraded, their ritual function remained consistent. This signifies civilizational exchange transcended material technology to abstract spiritual cultural levels. Such communication diminished cultural differences between tribes, paving the way for large alliances and state formation. All right, in the final part, let's explore state emergence. Two markers define early states: class stratification and urban centers. First, class stratification. By 2300 BCE, Longshan culture settlements along the middle lower Yellow River showed clear class divisions. Unequal wealth distribution was a key manifestation. Burial goods at Taoisi, a Longshan site, reveal this clearly. Grave goods quantity directly correlated with social status across cemeteries. Large tombs, 1% of total, contained hundreds of items. Ritual pottery, jade, stone vessels, drums, bronze bells, likely chieftains. Medium tombs had some jade, pottery, but no instruments. Thus, leaders monopolized jade to signify status. Medium tombs, without instruments, comprised 10%. These likely belonged to core members, while most tombs had minimal grave goods. These were probably ordinary members. Additionally, Dan Ku culture downstream developed ritual grave goods sets. Lower tombs had pottery ding or tripods or hu jars. Medium tombs added cups and stemmed vessels. The chieftains' tombs were the highest standard, including all the pottery items mentioned before, plus their own specially shaped cooking and drinking vessels. This shows that the tribe had developed a clear ritual system to maintain class order by this time. Next, another key sign of state emergence is the rise of cities. Around 2200 BCE, East Asia experienced a dry and cold climate period. Northern tribes at that time couldn't adapt to the climate change, forcing them south for survival, which led to wars with southern indigenous tribes. For example, the Taoyi site in southern Shanxi was invaded. The author also notes that at the bottom of some tombs at Taosi, 5 human skulls were deliberately placed, likely by enemies to insult the dead. Additionally, archaeologists found weapons of this era grew larger, with stone arrowheads and axes appearing. This shows that, under the pressure of northern tribes moving south, weapons were made not for hunting but for war. Frequent wars pushed small, scattered tribes to form large alliances through pacts or takeovers. For instance, the Wangwan culture from the Central Plains expanded south due to cooling climate, bringing Jinghan Plain and Dongting Lake Plain under its rule through warfare. As tribal alliances grew, their leaders gradually became the actual rulers of states. To better solidify alliances and fend off invaders, an upper middle class emerged, like soldiers, priests, and officials, detached from farming. In core areas, new urban zones called capitals appeared, separate from the land. These capitals differed from earlier moats against beasts. To resist enemies, they built multi-layered walls and defenses. For example, Tulsi site had a triple structure of palace city, inner city, and outer city, plus tall walls and defensive barbicans. A barbican is a defensive work built against city walls, helping guard against large-scale weapon attacks on walls or gates. The southward push of northern nomadic tribes sparked a domino-like wave of conflicts from north to south, leading early city-centered states toward maturity. Around 1800 BCE, the Uraltu culture in the Central Plains first showed early royal authority features and bronze ritual systems, which can be seen as the first stage of state development. First, the royal authority feature. The most prominent symbol in classical China was palace complexes along the city's central axis, And at the Earl-2 site, archaeologists have discovered similar urban planning designs. For example, there are 2 vertical and 2 horizontal roads dividing the central area into zones with large rammed earth buildings in the center, clearly the palace area for rulers and nobles.
Notably, the 2 early large palace buildings found have multi-courtyard layouts.
Multi-courtyard can be roughly understood as multiple rows of sihewan. One courtyard is like a ku-shaped sihewan, 2 like D-shaped, 3 like cook-shaped, and so on. Archaeologists believe that since classical Chinese buildings used earth and wood, limited by materials, they couldn't build up, so they went for depth. Using multi-courtyards symbolized noble status, and this style became mainstream for ancient Chinese palaces. Next, let's talk about the bronze ritual system. In summer 2004, a group of bronze ritual vessels centered on wine vessels was unearthed at the Earl-2 site. During Earl-2 times, bronze smelting wasn't mature, so limited bronze mainly made weapons like axes and arrowheads, but wine vessels were an exception. Earl-2 culture highly valued bronze wine vessels, with forms varying from simple to exquisite, divided into 5 levels from low to high. This easily reminds us of the 5 ranks of nobility started by the Zhou dynasty: Gong, Hao, Bo, Zi, and Nan. Notably, Chinese archaeologists generally believe the Earl-Tao site was the ruling center of the Xia dynasty. If this hypothesis holds, it means China already had a systematic aristocratic hierarchy during the Xia dynasty. By the early Gang culture stage, a bit later than Earl-2, which Chinese archaeologists see as the late Xia to early Shang period, the state system expanded further. During this time, large cities grew beyond single cities, forming urban clusters with functional differentiation and complementarity. For example, bronze ritual vessels unearthed in both Zhengzhou Shang City and Yanxi Shang City show they served sacrificial functions, like later political centers. The Panlongcheng Shang City site was a non-capital urban settlement. Built on the transportation route to copper mines, it specialized in acquiring mineral resources for the capital, similar to later economic hubs. The author notes early Shang influence expanded across Henan, parts of Shanxi or Shanxi, reaching Huai River and Han River, Yangtze tributary. Beyond core territories, the Shang controlled numerous outposts. These outposts were managed by nobles dispatched by the Shang king. Before departure, the king gifted them yi vessels, bronze wine containers. These later became symbols of Shang authority in those regions. Though Shang declined later, its bronze culture spread to Wei River Basin, Sichuan Basin, and Middle Yangtze. Local cultures like Wucheng, Gan River, received bronze ritual gifts from Shang while providing local resources in return. And this exchange spread bronze culture widely, laying foundations for Zhou dynasty's ritual-based rule.
All right, that covers most of From Myth to History. Now let's conclude.
This book offers a pathway to understand early Chinese civilization. Ancient East Asian civilization was inherently pluralistic, not a sudden eruption at one time or place, but like scattered stars, multiple centers developed. Then prehistoric peoples exchanged and merged, forming early states. This is mainstream archaeological consensus globally. Additionally, author Miyamoto Iwa emphasizes northern nomadic civilization's role in shaping early Chinese history. And most see nomadic culture as unrelated to prehistoric farming, often excluded from research. But archaeology reveals northern nomadism not only originated from farming but catalyzed early states. Southern invasions pushed city-states toward maturity. Precisely because of this perspective, observing from the edges of agricultural civilization, Miyamoto Iwa is called the civilization fringe school. However, archaeology is a wordless textbook. New discoveries often challenge old theories. In recent years, discoveries of new ruins have updated our understanding of ancient China. For example, recent research on Hilo Kingdom proves that, as early as 5,300 years ago, before northern invasions, capital, like central settlements, existed in the Middle Yellow River region. Similarly, the 2021 Sanqingdui discoveries in Guanghan, Sichuan, redirected public attention to the ancient Shu civilization, distinct from Central Plains bronze culture. Clearly, tracing Chinese civilization's origins is an immense and complex endeavor. Many new findings still await rediscovery. All right, that concludes our interpretation of From Myth to History. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.